We are live on YouTube. We're live on Session Wire.
Awesome.
Jess Bailey, should I have Craig and Eric on screen? I just have the Session Wire logo and the spinning circle of doom. Wow. I would refresh your page, Jess, and try to join again. Make sure you're joining from a Chromium-based web browser as well, and you'll get the best out of what we're about to do. Yeah, try to rejoin. If you have questions, shoot them in the chat. Anybody on YouTube, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Everybody in Session Wire, put your questions in the chat. We'll answer them as we kind of go along here, but can definitely see Eric's guitars. Great. Yeah, look at that, hey?
Some of them.
Yeah. It's a problem. He's got a bad case of gas.
Not as bad as my problem with wine, though. So it's, you know.
Oh, well.
Oh, that's a good problem to have.
Are we gonna have to talk about this, Craig?
Well, only because my wife works for Moed Hennessy. So if you're in need,
I'm in need of room. Is what I'm in need of.
I'm jealous. Yeah. I am jealous. We've got a whole cold storage room here that's going to waste. All right.
Man. Okay, we got to talk.
We'll talk after. Everybody, welcome to the second live event presented by Plug-in Alliance and Session Wire. In this event, we are here to talk about Black Box Analog Design and their new software plugin called HGQ, which is also coming out in hardware format next year. Is that correct, Eric?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
So excited.
We haven't done the official announcement yet, but it's on its way. The dealers know because kind of the cat's out of the bag with the software, so we've kind of let everyone know that it's coming.
Amazing. Such a cool piece of software, and the hardware will be unbelievable. We're just going to kind of jump right into it. Craig, you can share your screen. Craig's going to play us a mix that he's built with HGQ on it in several places, if I'm not mistaken. And we'll have a listen to this entire tune, top to bottom, and then we'll jump into talking about it and digging into some features. So
this tune is called Unholy. It's from a brother and sister team in Italy. I actually mixed this song about a year and a half ago, and for all the reasons we all just already discussed about using new people's material, I reworked this mix with HGQ, so I guess we're just going to play it down and then talk about the plugin. So here we go.
Why did I let you back in? If it's not you, it's him. If it's not him, it's sin. Why can't I breathe without it? Commanding me intense is in my religion. One, take her to the bar, to the show. 3, you let her go before she's lighting up. Let her know that you're going home. 5, you're meeting someone. Always get the red car. Oh, 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 oh. All I wanted, make me honest. I know that you want it, on it, and I got it. Cleanse my body, be my guide. Don't make me unholy, baby. Don't make me unholy. I'm reading at 3 a.m. Ask me if I'm up, teach me Exodus, and I kneel down to praise him. He can do no wrong, I got a confession. 6, drop a little hint, slide it in to get to 7. Sipping on the blood, and I ate the body. for ya. I've got no control. Take my flesh and blood and bone. I tried to serve ya. It's in the scripture. I bow to you. Repent me for all my crimes. I am a sinner, a mortal father. That's what I call you. My body is your sacrifice. All I wanted makes me honest. I know that you want it, on it, and I got it. Cleanse my body, be my guide. Don't make me unholy, baby. Don't make me unholy.
All right. Wow. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about that session. And having known Craig for a couple of years now and how meticulous he is, just have a look at the automation written into the session and the notes and the markers and the editing.
Did you enjoy the part where I accidentally deleted Dave? That was special.
It's the live mix experience.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened, but that was not on purpose. That suddenly the bass dropped down. Of course, I'm hiding all the stuff that you just talked about. Let's go to the lead vocal, because that's a good place to sort of look at automation if you want to see that madness.
Yeah.
It sounds so good, though. You're ridiculous. Come on.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Well, I can tell you that when I actually first mixed that session, there are a million parts. You're seeing a bunch of closed folders. There are lots and lots of little things, not just like stuff that goes across, just a million little things. Anyway, so do we want to talk about the session first before Eric actually talks about the plugin?
I would like you to just briefly describe what you've done with Black Box Analog Designs HGQ in this session, just briefly, and we'll dig into it a little bit more in a bit. Talk a little bit about why you used it in a couple of circumstances and what it did for you, just briefly. Again, we'll dig into it again. And then Eric's going to dive into what it is and why it exists, and we'll kind of go from there.
So I'm going to back up here and tell you that this session was mixed a year and a half ago before this plugin exists. So part of the goal was to find great ways to demonstrate what the plugin does, replacing stuff that was originally done. And in doing so, the mix is actually better than it was originally because of what we did and what I did and where I put it. I have it on the mix bus, and I have it on each one of these examples here. I have it on a parallel bus from all of these drum tracks, wherever you see that send. And here's that return. I have it on this piano that comes in the hooks. I have it on the main bass, which is an 808. I have it on a synth bass that comes in the last two hooks. I have it on a vocal chop, and I have it on a little wooden percussion sounding thing. Point being that there is nothing that you can't use this on and improve something. What I also want to say at this exact moment in time, and everyone needs to thoroughly understand this, so listen carefully. What I have done, because I've replaced things from an original mix, we're dealing with inches, not miles, when it comes to how drastic I have used the plugin. So when I explain examples or show examples, I'm going to show small sections, and I'm going to repeat them back and forth, bypassing and unbypassing, so you can easily hear the difference with it in and with it out. If you play long sections and bypass it in places, depending on where you bypass it, may make it easier or harder to hear what it's doing. So I'm going to use very short clips. What it does, in short, before we let Eric talk about it, it's an EQ. It's a 3-band EQ that also has saturation 2 levels of saturation that you can add in per band. And in doing so, I'm able to recreate things that were in the original mix that sometimes at least took 2 plugins and sometimes 3 in order to get the same result with 1 plugin. That is the huge benefit of what it has done and the improvements that it's made sonically. I wish there were a way for me to easily switch back and forth between the original mix and this mix, because doing that is not subtle at all. So, Eric, what took you so long?
Well,
I think I heard it took 7 years to
it
develop.
took literally the concept in the analog world started 7 years ago, which when I say that, people think I'm exaggerating, but literally took that long. And then the last year of development was the plugin and the hardware kind of working in this kind of cool symbiotic relationship to develop the last sort of part of it side by side, and they kind of informed each other. So it was a crazy long road to get here. And part of that is because things that are, not to take anything away from how difficult it is to make a great sounding plugin, but things that are relatively easy in the plugin world, in the sense that you can just sort of you need to compensate for gain somewhere, you can sort of hand wave that away. It's very easy to do. In the analog world, you have to come up with novel ways to do things. Oftentimes it's at the cost of something else, and it becomes very complex. So this is something that if it were just in the plugin form, you'd think, okay, it's not that crazy, but we're so used to being able to do anything with a plugin, we kind of forget that this is something that exists in the analog world, and that's something that was really difficult to do and took an incredible amount of time.
So Eric, you'd mentioned that developing it in software form allowed you to develop the hardware version. Is that kind of the order of things?
Well, we basically got to, I think we were about 6 years in, and we had brought on Ian McGregor, who is an incredible engineer, and he owns Standard Audio, who's also part of the design team for Shadow Hills and for Undertone. And so we brought him in maybe 5 years ago, and he's sort of been the guy getting his hands really dirty. We're sort of driving all these ideas, but he's the guy that really has been down in it for this whole time. And so we got to a point where we had a fully working prototype, but there was no faceplate. You had to control it from a computer terminal, and there was no chassis. It was literally just this death machine with all this voltage and a Variac, sitting on a desk and wires everywhere. And we shipped it to Germany, and the Brainworks team was brave enough to model that. And once we did that, we didn't have a slick interface. It was really, it was kind of this Frankenstein. But what we did is we took some of the parameters that we were still working on and sort of figuring out and tuning, and we put them into the interface. So things that would require a bunch of resistors to be changed or capacitors inside the analog unit, which would take time, and it would be very hard to, in a real world way, adjust them. We actually were able to use this early version of the plugin as sort of a virtual development platform. So we were able to have those parameters accessible to us. We spent a lot of time with it. We went through, we set the saturation that way, and some other controls. And then we took that, and Dustin at Brainworks was able to give us what the sort of theoretical resistor values would have been based on that. We went back to Ian, and then we sort of chased the plugin, and then we went back and forth that way. So it was basically the ability to have a virtual development platform, which is something that, if you're SpaceX or you're, some high-end company, obviously you can do. But if you're just making, boutique hardware, that's not something that you ever have the luxury of doing. So that was something that we worked really closely with Brainworks, and specifically Christoph had the vision, the shared vision to do that, and to go down that sort of crazy road. But it's allowed us to come up with something that is different than we would have otherwise.
So Eric, let's start talking about the parameters of the plugin and describe exactly what it is and what it does and how to use it, which is probably best done by you.
Sure. I guess the one thing I'd say, the main point that I think is really important about this is that it looks like an EQ, and that's intentional. And at the heart of it, it is based around an EQ topology, and we wanted it to feel familiar. Not necessarily an expanded view, but when you're in the standard view without the analyzer and all that, it looks like a traditional EQ. But the reality is that it is so much more than an EQ, and how you think about the tool changes how you use it, which changes the results you get. And that's the most important thing about it, I think, is that I don't reach for it like I would an EQ. It's a whole different type of enhancement that I use it for. And I kind of think of it as a sculpting tool, and a way to broadly sculpt a mix in a way that none of my other tools give me the ability to do. So that said, on the surface, yeah, you have 3-band EQ, but it's actually 6 bands, because you have cut and boost, and the frequency and Q control, as well as whether you're in shelf or bell mode, completely independent. So rather than having just a low, mid, and high, you actually have a boost and a cut completely separately for each band. And those interact in really unique ways. So that's kind of where it starts to get interesting, but where it gets even more sort of away from a traditional EQ, the cuts are all done in a very clean way, with think like a Sontec topology, and the boosts are all done even before you get to the saturation with tubes. So there are high voltage AX7s in each band, just in the boost section, even before you add the saturation to it. So again, 3 bands, but it's really 3 boosts, 3 cut, solid state cut, 2 boosts. And then the other thing you can do is you can configure them in parallel. So by default, the cut comes before the boost, and that sort of follows, I think, the workflow that a lot of us probably use, which is you use a clean EQ to cut away things that you don't want, resonances, things, where you have too much energy. And then you might use a more colorful EQ, often with broader strokes, to add, enhancement and energy. So that's how it works in default mode. So you're basically making all your cuts, and then that's all fed into the boost section in series. But you have the ability to go into parallel. And when you do that, what happens is that rather than being in series, both the cut and the boost are fed from the input. So what that does is it creates a very different phase interaction that can be either really subtle or help you bring elements out in a mix in really unique ways, especially when you have different cues for the boost and the cut.
It creates a curve that the two together you couldn't possibly create unless it wasn't a 6-band EQ, which it essentially is. So the addition,
Exactly.
the two together create a curve that's not possible otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, this thing is really all about the interactions. And what's interesting is you'll notice that if you go to the low band and you start cranking on it, you're getting movement and things happening way all the way up the spectrum, way beyond what that band is technically doing. So the bands all interact in really complex ways. And then once you start cutting and boosting together, you can create very complex curves that have really useful musical interactions. And people always think of, they think, okay, I can boost and cut, so it's like a pool tech, but only in a very general way. But that's what we're most familiar with in terms of the usefulness of boosting and cutting together, even though obviously the topologies has nothing in common with it. So that's the general topology. And then there's the saturation section. And the saturation section is actually the almost exactly the same saturation section from the HG2, the parallel saturation section, with slightly different gain staging, but the actual circuit is the same. And that is designed to saturate and clip asymmetrically in a very linear way. Almost no matter what level you feed it, you're getting very, very consistent results. And then you have the ability to mix it in as much as you want. And that's the saturation control that you have. And that is actually mixed into the boost signal itself, which means that it is in the filter section. So you're only saturating the area that you're filtering, so the area that you're boosting. And because you have saturation and boost control, you have the ability to decide how much saturation you want to add while still controlling how much overall boost you have. So it's like having a wet and dry control. And one of the things that we did, it's kind of getting into the weeds, but since we're there, is initially, and this is something that we were able to do because of the plugin. It really helped us do this in a way that made sense. Initially, we had the boost and then you have the saturation control. But what it would happen is if you had, say, 4 dB of boost, when you start driving saturation into that, you're adding the saturated signal. So you're adding signal to the signal you're boosting. So all of a sudden your 4 dB boost is no longer 4. Now it's 8, 10, 12, or even 20 dB. And so it gets out of control really quickly. So what we were able to do is create this dynamic interaction between the saturation control and the boost control. And what actually happens is as you turn up the saturation in the background, the boost knob or the boost control compensates for it by having the steps get smaller, essentially. So to the user, you never notice it. But what it means is that 4 dB boost still remains around 4 dB, no matter how hard you drive the saturation. And it's not exact. It's rough, but it's much, much closer. And we did that by ear in a way that we liked, that was musical. But that's something we did with a plugin. And then we went back to the hardware and recreated that as well. So that kind of gives you an overall look at kind of what it's doing.
So explain the alt situation between saturation with the alt so people understand what's going on there.
Yeah, so the alt on this is essentially like the alt on the H22, in that it's just a more aggressively voiced version of that tube. So basically, if you want, more obvious saturation, you can go to the alt setting and that'll give it to you. And it also has a different compensation curve, so it's not compensated quite as heavily. So you're going to get some more obvious saturation out of it in that way as well.
Okay, and Eric, if I can just keep guiding you in some questions. Or how to use. When we first talked, you sort of explained to me that it's best to cut first and then boost from there and add in saturation. Explain once again quickly why that's the route to go when using the plugin.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends kind of what you're trying to achieve, but traditionally we do tend to, you cut away the stuff you don't like, or you want less of, and then you boost afterwards. So I think that's a good place to start with it. But if I'm using it to add enhancement without huge jumps in volume, I will tend to cut and boost at the same time. Because what that lets me do is it lets me essentially cut out the material and then replace it back in with a version of it that has harmonics and or saturation. So I don't think of the boosting cut oftentimes as being problem solving in the same way that you would with a traditional EQ, although you can. I think of it as a way to manage
gain
the gain. Exactly. Yeah. So
that's what I was looking for you to say. So
exactly. Yeah, it's a way to manage gain structure. Absolutely. And it's a way to do that while adding things that are still really musical and enhance the signal. And because it's adding it in parallel, what you end up with is the ability to enhance the lower level stuff and the stuff that maybe you want to bring forward in the mix without stepping on the articulation and the transients and everything that's sort of in the front of the mix as much. And it's very different than, say, if you were to just use an EQ and another saturation device that saturates the entire signal. What you get in those cases is a lot of times you get this modulation with the vocal if there's a bass hitting, and you get this unwanted distortion. Whereas until you really get extreme with this, you get the enhancement and pushing everything sort of forward while leaving your mix intact. And that's, to me, has been the biggest game changer of this versus other tools that I have.
No, he used the word game changer.
I was just going to say.
Oh, yeah. Shoot, I'm not allowed to use it. Sorry.
That's when the stream gets shut down,
Yeah.
automatically. You got another question, Craig?
Well, I'm going to just guide him a little bit more.
Sure.
And another important factor here is that the bands between the high and low, the frequency and the Q, and those parameters can be either ganged together or set independently, which is very important to know. And to be honest with you, I didn't actually know that until a little bit after using it, and got frustrated that, okay, why can't I separate these two things until I read it and like, oh, they don't have to be ganged together.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think also it's important, I think, when starting out to use it in this expanded view mode, because you get to see all the parameters laid out in front of you. A lot of the decisions we made were based on the hardware. Like, how can I make these 4 knobs per band do all these different things? And that's why you have pushes, you have gangs, you have all these ways of interacting with it that feel really natural for hardware, but feel very odd for a plugin. So for that reason, we created this expanded view. And that actually was the Brainworks team came up with that idea. And I think it's one of the best features because it lets you see that they are separate and you can gang them or move them independently. And one of the cool things about that is that you can unlink them, but then when you relink them, you can move them together again, but they stay with each other relative to each other. So if you have, say, a cut that's narrower than a boost, you can offset them and then relink them, and then as you move it, they both move either narrower or wider, but proportionally the same. And that's something that can be really useful. And experimenting with that often gives results that you may not go for otherwise. It's really easy to experiment with and sort of hunt around and then find, oh, I'm able to really bring this instrument out or this element in a way that I like.
So Eric, let me just show people what we're talking about here. I've got a mix bus. This is on my mix bus. So I'm going to engage the low band here. And as you can see, the boost and the cut are both at 200. And as I move them, they're changing together. By clicking on the knob, it flashes and then one click on it once. Now they're moving independently. The same is true of the Q. Click on it one time. Now I can move the Q independently on both the bands. And so understanding how that works is paramount. Into using it as a 6-band EQ, so to speak, as you mentioned. And
agreed. And it does give you the visual feedback. So you click on it once and it shows you, it'll flash around either the boost and cut together or just the boost and just the cut. So it's showing you what you're now controlling.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I have to say that's cool. We got a question from Bill, and this I kind of want to steer things to actually demoing some things and hearing what it does. So Craig and Eric, decide amongst yourselves ESP-wise who's going to do what. I think, Eric, we decided you were going to kind of do some... Yeah, you want Craig to do it first?
Yeah, okay, we already heard this. I haven't gotten to see what I haven't seen it yet, so I want to know what he's done.
Okay, well, we have a question from Bill in the chat in SessionWire here. He's asking, does this have a color similar to the Fairchild even when just engaged with settings at 0?
You mean just instantiating the plugin before you do anything?
Yeah.
It has color, yes. Is it like the Fairchild? I've never compared them. The topology doesn't have anything in common, so I can't say one way or the other. I've never thought to compare them, but there's definitely a sound to it. It does not have transformers, so it is fairly linear in as a starting point, but there is still a sound to it.
There's a sound to it. So it's like the signals passing through tubes and things when it's just instantiated. Everything at 0.
It is not passing through the tubes. It's just the circuitry itself. There is some color. I mean, everything has a little bit, but it's not probably not nearly as much as something like a Fairchild, where you have transformers and you have, just loads of tubes that things are running through all the time.
I think it's safe to say, if you don't mind, that you're not going to use it just by instantiating and doing nothing. You're going to open it, you're going to put it on there, and you're going to move some parameters around. So I wouldn't really think of it as that kind of device. Frankly.
Cool.
Yeah, it's meant to be sort of as neutral as you can really be as a starting point, and then you add what you want very intentionally.
Incredible. Great. Bill says thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So let's do it. Let's get into it. Craig,
So here's what I'm going to do. I have what we're looking at is on the mix bus of this thing right now. I'm going to start at the second verse, which is a good place to play and then bypass in and out so you can actually hear what it's doing. I'm going to reiterate that if you're not paying close attention, that because I've made very small adjustments on purpose because I was matching a previous mix, you do need to pay attention and watch when I'm taking it in and out. If you're doing that, it will be obvious. If you're not paying attention, you're not going to know that it happened. So that's just a caveat based on the fact that this was a mix a year and a half ago that I had to match using it. As I said, I'm replacing 2 or 3 different plugins that are no longer in this mix that this replaced with one plugin. So let's just go to the second verse here. First, I'm going to play it and just bypass in and out. And then I'm going to play it with it in and just bypass the saturation. Let me just say this. As I show these examples, you could be saying to yourself, well, that just sounds like it's an EQ and I could do that with any EQ. That is not true. The saturation adds something that an EQ alone will not do. So if at any point I'm playing a demonstration here of any of the things that I'm about to show you, you can go, oh, well, I can just do that with an EQ. No, you cannot. It is not the same thing. It doesn't work alone as just an EQ. So let's start from that standpoint.
Well said.
I'm going to play the second verse. Cool.
I'm reading at 3 a.m. Ask me if I'm up. Teach me Exodus. And I kneel down to praise him. He can do no wrong. I got a confession. 6, drop a little hint, slide it in to get to 7. Sipping on the blood, and I ate the body of him. That is purgatory, that is where you'll find me, oh.
The second half of the pre, you could very easily hear what it's doing on the second half as I'm bypassing it in and out. It's obviously getting a little brighter. The saturation is there, and it's creating when I was doing this, trying to figure out words to describe what it was doing, because it doesn't just feel like an EQ. And now I'm not going to talk technically, Eric. There is a depth to what happens front to back, as far as I'm concerned,
100%.
what it's doing to the sound that an EQ alone would not do. What you're not seeing is in my inserts on A to E, there are other plugins here that you don't need to see in order for us to demonstrate that. But there is an EQ in here already. We're seeing this post an EQ and a compressor and before this ozone limiter here, which I can say because it's a native company without getting in trouble. Let's do that one more time.
I'm reading at 3 a.m. Ask me if I'm up. Teach me Exodus. And I kneel down to praise him. He can do no wrong. I got a confession. 6, drop a little hint, slide it in to get to 7. Sipping on the blood, and I ate the body of him. That is purgatory, that is where you'll find me. Oh, 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 oh.
Being bypassed, you can absolutely hear the mix going forward. You can hear the depth. You can hear a little bit of volume, obviously. You can get a little bit brighter, and you're hearing the saturation. Like I said, I only wish this existed when I did this mix originally. We're not talking, as I said, about huge increments. And dare I say, if you're doing a mix and you feel like you need to do massive increments in every single plugin you're using, you're not mixing correctly. We're working in inches here, not miles. I'm going to do the same thing. And now I'm going to play instead of bypassing the whole plugin, I'm just going to bypass the saturation so you can actually hear what the saturation alone is doing in the same example.
I'm reading at 3 a.m. Ask me if I'm up. Teach me Exodus. and I kneel down to praise him. He can do no wrong. I got a confession. 6, drop a little hint, slide it in to get to 7. Sipping on the blood, and I ate the body of him. That is purgatory, then is where you'll find me. Oh, 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 oh. All I wanted, make me honest. I know that you want it, and I got it. Cleanse my body, be my God. Don't make me unholy, baby. Don't make me unholy.
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I mean, you can absolutely hear what it's doing, and it really does. It excites it, but not in a way that feels artificial. It feels like it's bringing, like you said, some of the energy forward, which is really what it's doing, because it's that
Eric,
signal underneath.
it just makes the mix sound better. How about that?
It's really incredible. And to now understand how it works, you know, like I've had it open this week and kind of messed around with some things, but now to know, you know, how everything was designed and how everything's connected to each other, it's so cool. It's such a cool piece of technology.
All right, let's go to an individual element where it can be really obvious really quickly. I have this little percussion thing that's happening here. Here's the plugin. I actually have BX glue in front of it. I'm allowed to say that too, right? I've got much more extreme examples of what's going on here. Way more saturation in both bands. Nothing at the low end, because this doesn't have any really low end into it. I'm artificially creating some with this. And Eric, let's point out one other thing that is true of saturation in general. The more you use, the more a plugin starts to sound and act like a compressor, because saturation is a clipper and chopping off peaks for all practical purposes. So to some degree, the more saturation you're adding, the more clipping it's doing, the more it starts to act like a compressor, which, if you understand that, can greatly be used to your benefit in any mix. It can also be used to your detriment if you don't understand that it's doing that.
Sure.
So
I mean, that's really the heart of the HG2 to me, is people think of it or talk about it as a way to add harmonics, but really it's about how you can squeeze the dynamics and you can control peaks and add density with it, because the whole signal's going through it. You have the parallel saturation, but also you're getting that leverage at the pentode and the triode. Whereas with this, you have exactly what you're describing, but it's all in parallel. So you bring that up, but that's why you're not stepping on your transients and your articulation nearly as much, because it's in parallel. So you can it's kind of the best of both worlds.
And this is a good time to tell you that in some of the things that I've replaced, I was actually using an EQ or two and the HG2, and have replaced that with this one plugin. So, which is a very cool thing as well. All right, let me play this little example. Let me make sure I'm in the right place here. Yes, I am. Okay, so let's play what this is. The most exciting part alone, but it does a good thing within the mix itself. Let's bypass it. It's obviously doing something. You can clearly hear it, but within the context of the mix, without that part completely disappears. And in order to hear it, I'd have to crank it so loud that by the time you can hear it without this there, it's too loud already. So the saturation and the boost that's happening within the plugin are allowing this part to be heard without going to extremes. That's what the saturation and the EQ section is doing.
At the end of the day, that's what matters, is what it's doing in the context of the mix. Doesn't really matter how it sounds on its own.
Right. So let me just A/B this one more time, and then we'll go and play the entire mix and hear that and take it in and out, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. All right, now let's do the same thing in context of the mix.
Slided in to get to 7, sipping on the blood, and I ate the body of him. That is purgatory, then is where you'll find me. Oh, 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 oh.
Last 2 bars there, you could really hear that when I bypass it, that part just goes away. Obviously, with all other stuff going on, it comes and goes as it is. But in those last 2 bars, without it in, it just disappears.
Little hand slided in to get to 7, sipping on the blood, and I ate the body of him. That is purgatory, then is where you'll find me. Oh, 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 oh.
Brilliant about this song and the production, and this kid is extremely young, wise beyond his years. Just talking musically speaking, is you take a part like that and you go, what is the importance of that part? And you go, well, if you think about the lyric, it's keeping time literally and figuratively along with what the lyric is saying. So musically speaking, it's a great part, and making sure it's heard has everything to do with conveying the message, which is something everyone should always be thinking about when they're mixing, is the intentionality of the lyric and how to make the mix perform based on what the song is telling you to do. So
yes, thank you.
We're gonna cut that out and put it on a poster. And
yeah, make shirts, please.
We've got a quick YouTube question here from Hilton. They're wondering what the ballpark cost of the HGQ hardware will be. I don't know if you can disclose that or not, but
first of all, Hilton was one of the people that I've been talking to since the beginning of this, and he actually had great feedback. So message me, we'll talk about it. I would probably really upset our dealers if I got into that before they announced it, but hit me up, man. And again, I cannot wait to get one in your hands.
All right, let's go to the piano real quick. This is a part that comes into in the hooks. It was recorded with an iPhone, believe it or not, and it has been lo-fied in every possible way, and that has been added to. I actually have a BX or a reverb after this because originally there was a reverb after it. Let's just hear what this is doing. So it's easier to hear what it's doing. Bringing it alive in a way that an EQ alone would not do. So if I remove the saturation and play just the one chord, that we need to find you a different career. Cool stuff.
It's huge in context. It's funny. It's actually much easier to hear in context and how it interacts with everything else.
It is, but we figured we'd solo some stuff first.
Totally.
Let's move on to a couple other things. I mean, I've got a lot of examples here, probably more than we need.
Well, here's a question that comes from the chat too, and pretty sure you kind of touched on this already. But Joe C asks if this could replace the HG2.
It depends what you're doing with the HG2.
And it also depends if you have an EQ before or after the HG2. If you spend enough time, Eric, if I may, if you
Yeah.
spend enough time between EQs and a saturation device like the other black box plugin, you can get close. But this is why I say, if you know what you're going for in the first place, you know it needs to perform what this is performing. Why use two plugins if you can do it in one? And as soon as you really learn how this interacts, it's actually quicker and easier to get the sound. If you know that's what you're going for, than using two plugins and having to go back and forth one at a time to try to get to this place that you can do it in one stroke. Is that fair to say, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I would say it depends what you're getting out of each one. So the way I use them, they are not interchangeable, because what I look for out of the HG2 is, like I said, is to squeeze the whole mix dynamically. So I'm getting multiple dB of dynamic control and transient control out of it across the board, and density for the whole mix. That's something that you can't get out of this in the same way because it's in parallel. So it's not going to control those transients to the same degree. So I'm looking for a different type, usually kind of a lift or a recontouring with the HGQ. So I'm using the HGQ into the HG2 because together they're giving me something different. And they work really well together. So in some cases, you may be able to replace one with the other, but only for very specific things.
Well, my point was that given enough time with an EQ and with the HG2, given enough time, you could probably get to a similar place, which is not reversing what you just said. I'm just saying that if given enough time, you can probably get pretty close, or at least I was able to, and not exactly the same.
And it depends how heavy-handed you're being with it. You know, if you're recontouring something dramatically, then it might be harder. If you're looking for subtle enhancement, then absolutely.
Exactly. Yes, if you have to do something dramatic, no, you're not going to accomplish the same thing. Let's check out this synth bass part real quick. I'm going to bypass it first. And here I'm doing stuff on the low end. I'm doing stuff on the high end. The bands are ganged in this instantiation of the plugin. And let's listen to it bypass first. Fatter, more of everything, more in your face, more forward. I have this brand new plugin from before, and I'm not trying to sell another plugin. I'm just saying what I'm about to say is what this is doing on top of this makes this more dramatic than with this not here. So I'm going to turn around here so I can bypass both these things at the same time, and bypassing them both at the same time yields something that couldn't happen otherwise, that this is doing on top of it. No. No. Well, somehow HGQ is multiplying what's happening with the SPL before it in a very cool way, I found. So there's some interaction between the two, but this is making that sound better than it would otherwise. What else should we? Let's show one more example of from me with the 808 bass here. Now, depending whether or not you're on YouTube and depending what your speakers are capable, this may or not be as obvious. With my 110s here, it's quite obvious.
And when you play this demo, give it a kind of a second to unmute after, because some of these examples are really dynamic as well. So auto mute in Session Wire is trigger, and then just give it a second.
Okay.
Also question from Session Wire: could I have multiple instances of it without it taxing my CPU? Asks Jay.
I mean, that's a question to answer. Depends on your CPU.
Yeah. So the precursor question was, how CPU friendly is it? From Jay.
I mean, it's admittedly, it's doing a lot. It's not crazy, but it's not light. I will say, I mean, it is doing a lot, and there's internal oversampling. So, with almost any modern computer, you should have no problem. But like, I run sessions at 96, and if I have it on every channel, obviously that might get taxing. What have you found, Craig?
I've had no issues whatsoever, period. But then again, I've got a system that is frightening.
Yeah.
All right, let's play this 808. Let's play without it first. Way bigger,
just
real quick.
Quick suggestion on this, Craig, if you wouldn't mind, just let it play for a bit and unmute and mute, just so auto mute doesn't cut in and out while you're looping. Yeah, that's
nice.
Ridiculous.
Let's hear it in the scope of the mix, and I'll bypass back and forth. How important the 808 feels is dramatically different with that in. Dramatically different. I mean, you can feel the 808's there, but it's not important. And it's important without it being too loud, which is what is cool about how this is working.
It's like you said, it just is felt so much better way down in that bottom end. It just, even with headphones on, it's...
Well, we're looking at it.
Yep, it's great.
And now I'm using the more aggressive saturation with the alt button here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one more time, quickly. That to me is not subtle.
No, so it adds so much character and really brings it out, and brings it to life, like you said.
I can show one more example if we want to hear, which this one's super subtle. If it'll take a second to zone in on what's happening here, but this particular instance is across any drum track here where you see a send here. So this is done in parallel. So I'm adding HGQ to the drum balance as opposed to on the wet dry balance is being added to as opposed to balanced.
Got it.
Which is anyone that has seen any of my stuff, I'm not a big fan of not doing things like this in parallel across many tracks. It is not on I originally had it on the actual kick drum and decided it was doing too much. So I removed it, and now it's just on a dirty kick, which doesn't really sound like a kick, and the backbeat stuff and some other things. So there's two ways to listen to this. I'm going to play it and mute here so we can hear what it's doing to entire drum bounce. Of course, because it's being added, the level is going to go down, but you'll also be able to, it's valuable to see how much this is adding, even from an adding state. Then we're going to play it, and I'm just going to bypass the plugin so that the level doesn't change. We just hear what the plugin is doing to this balance. And I'm going to mute other stuff so we can just kind of focus on this for a second. Let's see what this feels like. And I have a... When I'm muting over here, not at the bypass button. So let's look at that one more time. So other than the mild amount of level change, it's the depth that is most felt. I'm not sure I don't know what the right word to use is, other than it adds a dimension and a depth that this wasn't happening in the original mix. There was nothing doing this. I added this entirely to this mix for this demonstration, and it's just doing something absolutely wonderful. Now I'm going to play the same thing, and I'm just going to bypass it so that the level doesn't change as much. We can just hear what's happening in the plugin itself. Saturation on both the mid and the upper bands. A little more saturation here than on the mid band. These are still ganged together in this particular instance. I did previously have a demonstration where I wasn't ganging all these together, but decided not to bother with that one. At this point,
yeah,
I have shown you a bunch of different examples. Did I show the piano yet? Did I do that yet?
Yes. Yeah, the iPhone piano?
Yeah. Okay, I did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how much more convincing it needs.
Well, I have one example, and it's me going in a whole different direction, kind of wanting to show sort of how it can do some extreme contouring in a way that may be more than you normally would. But I'm glad those are good real world examples. You know what I mean? In a context, this is a little, over the top, but I think both are useful to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
you can. Do you want to share your screen, Eric, while you're doing this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And just for everybody in the chat and on YouTube, keep the questions coming. Charles is here from Plugin Alliance as well. If you have Plugin Alliance specific questions or anything HGQ related that Eric or Craig couldn't cover, that doesn't seem possible. I think we're pretty good here.
I'm not a Plugin Alliance employee yet.
So for whatever reason, it's not letting me share my screen. It was before. It's saying that I need to set the permissions, and we just tested it.
Can you? So just make sure SessionWire or the browser screen recording permission is set in Mac OS.
It is, and it's requiring me to restart SessionWire.
You can do that and rejoin if you want. We'll still be here.
All right.
We'll wait. We'll take some questions in the meantime.
Yeah. Is EQ? So there might be one in the YouTube. Joe C. That wouldn't be Joe Ciccarelli, would it? There he is. No, sorry, Joe. Yeah. Good to see you in the chat. Eric's back.
There you go. Perfect. Which window? Entire screen?
Yeah, do the entire screen, and then we can see all the pop-ups and the
Easy,
mouse. And, yeah.
All right, let me get out of here. Perfect.
Awesome.
You can see that?
Yes.
All right. So this is actually, I wanted to show something that would be kind of extreme. And so I went back to a session from an artist named Ivory Lane, who's a really cool artist out of Nashville, and she produces everything herself, and done a lot of records together. This is about 2 years old though. And so I went back and I took everything off. I had a lot of analog on different, on the drum bus, on the mix bus, on vocals, all that. I took everything off. And so in doing that, the mix sort of, kind of fell apart. And I wanted to see, can I essentially bring that back by recontouring it with this one plugin? So I'm going kind of crazy, but I'll play you with, and then I'll play you without, back and forth. So I'll just start from right before the chorus here. So that is with the HGQ, and I'm going to play that same section again, and I'm just going to bypass the plugin in and out. And what you're going to hear is that, the low end I'm adding is dramatic, and the recontouring I'm doing up here, you'll hear, but if you listen, you'll notice that the elements that I'm not going after stay locked in. So here we go. I'm hoping that everybody can hear that pretty clearly.
It's probably important to mention that you're using it in MS.
I am, and I'm going to explain what I'm kind of doing with each band, if that's helpful, and why I'm doing that.
For me.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what my goal was with this. So let me go through. I'm going to just take out all these different bands, and I'm going to show you. So the first thing I needed to do was the low end was really lacking on it. So I wanted to be able to bring up the low end dramatically and add weight to it. But I also didn't want it to get too boxy. So I'm using this cut here to actually offset some of that and to change the shape of this. So what I'm going to do is bring this in and out. This is just the low band now in the mid. And that's the very thing that terrifies me. You can hear that I'm able
dramatic, and that's pretty cool because the low end goes away when it's not there.
Completely, yeah. And it was because I took so much off the mix, and it was like, can I really bring it back just with this? And by boosting just this massive amount and such aggressive saturation, I'm able to bring all that up, but then really control by going to 200 and narrowing it out. Really kind of control how much I'm creeping up into this range, and keep that sort of clear. The next thing I wanted to do was add some top end lift, but without getting too harsh. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you without the cut what it sounds like. And then I have the cut at 10K narrow to sort of bring out or to reduce some of the nastiness, that you get when you boost that much.
Everything that terrifies me, baby. And by the phone means something's on the line. I said I gave it all, it was just my time. As I ain't ever kissed the risk worth taking till I met your lips and now I'm shaking, standing on the edge. No, there's no going back. I think it might be love, but I won't say that. As I'm terrified that I'm okay with knowing you could leave me devastated.
That it
Dude.
really does. Yeah.
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's great because you kind of, it's sort of this,
I just learned something.
it's kind of this push and pull, it's like I'm pushing up all this energy, but I have too much here. So then I'm kind of pulling back on it. And then in the mid range, what I'm looking to do really is I'm sort of looking to bring that vocal, not make it that much louder, but a little bit more presence and sort of lock it in more. So I'll bring that in and out and then, bring the boost and cut up and down. So you can hear that. So here's with the mid.
Everything that terrifies me, baby. And by the phone means something's on the line. I said I gave it all, it was just my time. As I ain't ever kissed the risk worth taking till I met your lips and now I'm shaking, standing on the edge. No, there's no going back. I think it might be love, but I won't say that. As I'm terrified that I'm okay with knowing you could leave me devastated.
That over exaggeration on the boost that you did there really drove that home.
Yeah, you hear what's happening.
Yeah.
And then you see how I'm basically using. So one thing we should explain that I guess we didn't talk about is that the boost is shown in blue down here, and the red is your cut, and then the white is the result. So the resulting response. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm bringing the signal back down to unity or very close and flattening it back out. But now it's got all that saturation in there. And so now I want to show you that same example, but I'm just going to show you from no saturation all the way up, and you'll hear how it really locks that vocal in, and you can kind of decide where you want it to sit in the mix.
Everything that terrifies me, baby. And by the phone means something's on the line. I said I gave it all, it was just my time. As I ain't ever kissed the risk worth taking till I met your lips and now I'm shaking, standing on the edge. No, there's no going back. I think it might be love, but I won't say that. As I'm terrified that I'm okay with knowing you could leave me devastated.
So it becomes just another way to control where that vocal is sitting. And obviously, if I was doing this in the context of the mix, I can adjust that in different ways. But this is really just to show how you can dig deep into the mix and really recontour it and sort of reshape it. So that's the mix.
You know what
Sorry.
that makes this?
What's that?
An excellent mastering tool.
Exactly. And that's sort of, I mean, I guess in a way I'm using it in the way mastering tools would be used, in that you're limited. In the second part of that is the side. So this is all, we're just looking at the mid. I'm going to bring the side in all together so you can hear it. But what I'm doing, just so you can see the response, basically I'm doing something similar where what I wanted to excite and lift the sides, because I felt like we were lacking a lot of excitement that the original mix had. So you'll notice that I'm doing less compensation here, and I'm sort of letting it creep up a little bit so it's brighter. And I'm also rolling off a bit of the low end because I don't want it in the sides. So I'm going to play this, and then I will engage these side bands.
And that's the very thing that terrifies me, baby. And by the phone means something's on the line. I said I gave it all, it was just my time. As I ain't ever kissed the risk worth taking till I met your lips and now I'm shaking, standing on the edge. No, there's no going back. I think it might be love, but I won't say that. As I'm terrified that I'm okay with knowing you could leave me devastated.
That
So
ain't subtle.
obviously, yeah, there's nothing subtle about that. It's probably further than it would need to go, but it kind of gives you an idea of how far you can push it. And the mix, even though it's really dramatic in some ways, the mix still doesn't it doesn't lose sort of the fundamental elements that I have going on. It kind of keeps the foundational elements locked in a way that I can't get if I push other saturation tools or other tools that hard. It really mangles it in an unpleasant way, where this is like I can keep digging in and pushing, and it just sounds good in different ways. So you can get pretty wild contours in reshaping that really it's hard to make sound bad. They just sound different. So that's that example, and I think that's really what I wanted to show. Unless there's anything people have specific questions on.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When using in mid-side, was
Uh-huh.
there any thought to being able to gang the ins on either the mid together or all the sides together?
Um,
Oh, well, obviously not, but
you mean in terms of control,
be able to mute to bypass all three bands simultaneously when in mid-side?
well, you can solo the mid and side, but there actually isn't a way to do that. That's a good thought. In the hardware there is, because the way you bypass a band, other than down here, is you just push the cut. And so on the hardware, you just push all three together, but there isn't an easy way to do it on that. So to show with and without, I guess I could copy it, paste it to B, turn them off, and go back and forth. That's probably
that's the way to do it.
The way to do it. Yeah. One other thing I should mention, because I know that people in the comments are going to say, yeah, but that's louder. Yes, it's louder because we're adding energy. But if you take away the low end here, we actually are not much louder at all. Really, what's adding the level is because I'm adding so much low end, but that is what I'm trying to do. So we wouldn't want to compensate for that. People have this idea that you should compensate for everything. So if I add, 4 dB of low end, well, I got to bring the whole track down by 4 dB. But that doesn't actually make any sense, because I don't have 4 dB of low end now. I have the same low end, but everything else is 4 dB lower. So in the context of a mix, that it doesn't make sense. We do have attenuation controls on here, and what they're for is not compensating for your boosts, as in, say, this low end. What they're for is compensating for the topology of the EQ. And what I mean by that is, if I turn off everything else, right, but I crank this low end, I'm actually getting, if you look, you'll see that you're getting some boost all the way up, right? And it's because of the way the topology works and the enhancement or the bands interact. So I'm trying to boost this. I want this louder. I don't want to compensate for that. That's defeating the purpose. But I don't necessarily need this to be louder. So that's what this attenuation is for, is that once you are boosting these kind of things, you flatten it out as you want. I'm using these cuts to flatten it back out, but you could also simply use the attenuation to get the bulk of your curve sort of back down, so that these areas, if I didn't have that going, this area where I'm not really going after it with an EQ, are locked in the same level with and without. So that way it's a fair comparison. So that's kind of
ingenious. That's just ingenious.
Yeah, that's what they're for. And people have asked, they said, why isn't there an in and out control? And because the YouTube people are going to ask it, there's a couple reasons. One is that many EQs don't have in and out controls. I don't think that every plugin should be there to make up for poor gain staging. And I don't mean that in a snarky way, but the reality is, if you need in and out control on every plugin, your gain staging is wrong. And so I don't, when you add those stages to the analog side of things, you get added noise. There's a real cost to it. And because it's really important for us to keep a one-to-one back and forth with the hardware and the software so they work together, we decided that we don't want to do that. But also because, again, we're not trying to compensate for either the gain staging or the fact that you're boosting something. If I want to boost something, I'm looking for that to be louder. So, I'm not going to boost the low end by 4 dB, then pull the whole mix down by 4. So that's why we have these attenuation controls that are 4 1 dB steps that let you basically compensate for the topology itself, but they're not there to make up for gain staging or to compensate for boosts. So I hope that answers that or preempts that question, because I know it's something that a lot of people have asked and will ask.
That's incredible. I'll stop sharing your screen for a second so everybody can kind of see your face and Craig's face, Charles' face. That is amazing. And again, now that I know how to use it, I'm going to dig in. Anybody have any questions in SessionWire? Anybody in YouTube? Anything that you're seeing, Charles, that's popping up that we should address?
And before you do that, I'm simply going to say that between what Eric showed on and Mixbus doing something extreme, and then my finely detailed stuff, it frankly just proves that this plugin is very versatile, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty heavy-handed with it, kind of ham-fisted, intentionally so, where you're really going after very specific things in a measured way, which I think is a real-world use, especially if you're already in a mix. It's not like you're mixing into it. If you already have something, you're replacing other tools, you have to be that way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Incredible. Got a question from Joe here. How do you know if you're getting appropriate signal in, given there are no in and out controls?
The good news is that because we don't have transformers on the input and output, and because of the topology, it's a high headroom. You don't really, it's not like the HG2 that's very, very dependent on how hard you hit it. This is very consistent, regardless of where you hit it. So hit it with a decent level, you're going to get the saturation you want out of those saturation stages, even if you don't hit it hard. So it's not finicky in that way. So basically use good gain staging that allows you to boost as much as you need without clipping your next plugin or whatever's next. And that's really it. If you just use this in the context of a mix with normal, just good gain staging, you'll be absolutely fine.
Perfect. Joe says cool. Yeah, that's excellent. Anything popping up in YouTube, Charles?
We have a feature request.
Okay. Oh God. Here we go.
You know how that works is like buy it first and then we'll talk about it.
I'm open. I'm open to all good ideas. What do we got?
Yeah, just input output knobs up at the top, and then something about synchronizing tooltips for mid side when the plugin's in mid side mode and left right when it's in left right mode.
If there are tooltips that are not synchronized, absolutely, that's something that I'll talk to the guys about. In and out, like I said, there is a real cost to that on the hardware, and we haven't talked about it much, but I guess I'll kind of spill it a little bit here. There's the hardware and plugin. We worked very hard to keep them one-to-one because they're going to work together in a way that hasn't been done before. So they need to be able to recreate each other directly.
Are you suggesting that the GUI is going to control the hardware?
That what?
That the GUI is going to control the hardware.
It's going to be seamless is all I'm going to say. Yeah, and the thing is that as you know, most of the Brainworks plugins have some kind of plugin only features. You drop it down and there's plugin only features. You have a widener, you have a stereo control, all that kind of stuff. TMT. It was very intentional that we did not add that for this reason. And at first it was a little bit of I don't say a battle, but it was it took a lot of conversations to get everyone on board and understanding why it was so important. And that's why our focus was to add features like the analyzer and to add another way of controlling it with this expanded view, rather than anything that actually changes this one-to-one back and forth with the plugin and hardware, because that's going to be really important in what's coming next. Amazing.
We can edit that out of the reposted YouTube video if you need.
That's fine. It's fine. We've hinted at it. I mean, people, it's close enough that it's okay.
Cool. Bill has a quick question here, which we did kind of touch on. Craig showed us a demo of this. he was asking, would you only use it as an insert, or would you use it on a send and really hit it hard and blend it? Which Craig did on the drums. All of the drums, he had it set up as a send and basically parallel saturation.
I actually have other examples in this mix because I made a lot of them where I had other examples where send and return, so where it was being done in additive. It works. It depends on what the goal of the plugin and what the sound is, but it can be used either way. One question that might come up, that has yet to come up, is if that's the case, there's no wet-dry balance anywhere, which would be a plugin-only feature. So,
yeah, I mean, the thing is that the sound that you're getting from the saturation is in itself, you have a wet-dry control essentially, because you can control. So it's like, how many levels of wet-dry do you really need? You know what I mean? You already can control how much saturation and how much gain. So it's, again, one of those things where it didn't really make a lot of sense, because on its own, it's not something that is so colorful with everything at zero that you need that. The idea would really to have it be a platform that's pretty transparent to start with, and then you can add as much or as little as you want.
And if anyone that follows me on Instagram constantly hears, this is why I more often use plugins in parallel than I do on buses, for this exact reason, so that I can easily control that balance up and down and make it additive as opposed to balance control.
Sure.
For whoever cares.
Yeah, and that, honestly, that's why we spent so much time with making sure that that you have a saturation control that is independent from the boost control, where you can control it in it's a very powerful thing to have them be independent and have them work the way they do without sort of being linked and tied together. And that's something that seems obvious now, but was not easy to do in the analog world. And we tried a lot of versions of this to get to something that felt effortless. And when you use it, you don't even think that there's anything going on.
Incredible. This is great. Bill says, thanks. Yeah, cut the tail end of it. Awesome.
Thanks, Bill.
Gabriel says, I appreciate the simplicity and straightforward nature of the design and functionality. I mean,
man, thank you. I will say there's a few people. So the response has been incredible, especially from engineers and people that use analog. There have been a few people that I think probably, I'm guessing, are younger and grew up on, plugins that all look like, can I say FabFilter? I love those guys, I have to say. Plugins like that, that were clearly designed as a software tool only. And so the nature of this sort of control approach, and for people like that, I think it was a little bit difficult to get their heads around. It's like, well, why would you have a plugin where you clicked a knob, to control multiple things? And it's a valid question if you've not used hardware, and it's because it is developed from a piece of hardware. And we really did try very hard to make it as intuitive as possible with as much going on as there is, and make it multi-layered so that if you wanted to use it like a very straightforward EQ, not in the expanded mode probably, you can. And anyone that's used a 3-band EQ can walk up to it, and they're familiar with the controls in general, with the exception of being able to boost and cut simultaneously. And then you can kind of dive down deeper and deeper and deeper, but only as deep as you want. So I'm showing like that example where it's like it's using MS and parallel and series and everything, but you don't have to get that deep in if what you need to accomplish doesn't require it.
Fantastic. Michael says the plugin looks beautiful.
Oh man, thank you.
Which it does.
We really, really worked tirelessly on it, and I cannot thank the guys at Brainworks enough. I mean, we really dragged them through a lot to get to this point. I mean, it was not a normal development process. I owe the guys lots and lots of drinks and meals at NAMM, because I mean, we really asked a lot of them. It took a long time, and we asked them to go out on a limb and do things that they've never done. And actually, I don't know if anyone has done to get to this point. So yeah, it really is because of those guys.
Amazing. We're coming up on the 90-minute mark here. We're going to do some final remarks from everybody, and we'll kind of wrap it up. I want to start with Charles first. Any final remarks from yourself, Plugin Alliance?
This is just my personal experience with the plugin, kind of circling back to what you were talking about before, like when you're using it, really driving the knobs a lot to get a great tone out of it. I found, just in my own experience, was the best way of using it. You can also use it subtly, but the stuff I'm doing, if I'm mixing a track, like I love that you can get so much color out of it and so much flavor. And that's how I like to use it. So I think anybody joining in here, like when you're experimenting with it, crank the knobs, like crank them all the way, see what happens, and dial back from there, because I think you're going to get the most out of it that way as well.
That sounds a whole lot like don't listen to what Craig has to say.
Different flavors. It's funny.
Why I'm going to remark next is
Sure.
that I'm actually looking forward into driving it harder when I get to use it starting from scratch with a mix, as opposed to replicating a mix that was already done. So I just haven't had the opportunity to really crank it. But now, after seeing what was done by Eric on that, there's no way I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Eric, yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, thank you to everybody who stuck with us and asked questions. And I hope I've answered them, and I hope kind of given an overview of how I use it and the thinking behind it. But we're always available too. You can always email us or, comment, whatever. We try to respond as much as possible. Black Box is something that started really because there were tools that we wanted and nobody made, and we started making them, and it sort of grew into this, but that wasn't ever sort of the goal. And because of that, we're just still kind of blown away that people are using the tools, and it's still the coolest thing ever. So, feel free to get in touch with us, and we'll happily nerd out about it with you.
Eric, I want to go back and show you every mix I've done for the past 3 years and show you how many instances of black boxes are in my mixes.
I think that is the craziest thing to me. I mean, that blows my mind. Guys like you guys, I mean, I guess I shouldn't name names, but people who make records that I've been listening to nonstop for the last however many years, I had no idea. And they'd hit me up, hey, by the way, I've used it on every mix. What? It's mind blowing to me. The guys like you were using it to make these incredible mixes for incredible artists. And I mean, it's that will never, ever get old or be something I think that is lost on us.
So hearing about using a plugin and watching other people using a plugin is not the same thing as diving in and start playing it with yourselves.
No.
So I would highly suggest that if any of this was intriguing to you, to just dig in and start using it. Because you're gonna learn more that way than us talking here for the next 17 hours.
100%. And I would say that think of it, don't think of it as an EQ. Think of it as a way to sculpt your mix and to enhance your mix in kind of a new way. If you think about it differently, again, you'll use it differently. You'll get a different result. And of course, I have to say, huge shout out to the other half of Black Box, Robert Wainscott, who's not here, but there is none of this without him. So huge shout out to him as well.
Eric, do you know what the last thing I've learned about this throughout this conversation and us we're talking together about using this? I don't ever want to develop hardware or software. I'll just be an end user. Thank you.
Dude, especially hardware. All right. One quick little story. The reason that we have a plugin is because of Dave Pensato, because Dave and I were hanging out one night, and we had just started shipping hardware HG2s, and we thought our packaging was good, but I don't know if FedEx like flies the plane low and just kicks them out of the back, but their ability to destroy gear is just epic. And so I was sitting around with Dave one night, and I said, Dave, man, like, we should just make plugins because, at least then FedEx or UPS, wherever, can't break them. And he goes, oh man, you want to do a plugin? He goes, here, let me hit my buddy Dirk, and literally emailed Dirk right then while I was there. And Dirk emailed me that night. And so that's the whole reason that this has happened, which was incredibly fortunate and, huge thanks to Dave. But yes, you're absolutely right. You do not want to you don't want to go down that road.
No thanks.
Amazing. Well, I'll take my turn, do the final remarks here. Everybody in the YouTube stream, if you enjoyed what you saw, but you want to be a part of the next event like this in the Session Wire studio, go get yourself a mega subscription. Lots of things like this coming down the pipe. I'm pretty sure Plugin Alliance is going to have sales on individual plugins for the rest of eternity as well. So make sure you sign up for the news list, get your codes. If you really enjoyed the experience in SessionWire, we're also offering a really good discount on a subscription. Hit me up at info@sessionwire.com. If you're a first-time subscriber, I'll hook you up with a 40% discount on a studio level subscription. So get in here, start collaborating, connect with people, share what you're working on. Yeah, hit me up, info@sessionwire.com. Thank you guys so much for your time today. Thanks everybody for dropping in. Martin.
Thank you guys.
Yep, Martin's watching here. Missed my... Oh, there. He says everything was fine. It was great. So, the blessing from Plugin Alliance.
When does fine equal great? When my wife says fine, I know she doesn't mean great.
In Germany.
I should have filtered that message. I'm sorry. Martin, thank you again. Martin's been watching. I've been working on this with him and Charles for a long time. And, a pleasure to work with Plugin Alliance.
Martin.
Yeah. Pleasure to work with Plugin Alliance, Black Box, Analog Design, and Craig and Eric. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
See you all soon.
See you, everybody. Cheers.
Bye.